The bell for final period had long since rung, echoing through the emptying halls of Oak Ridge High. The late October sun slanted through the dusty windows of the auditorium, catching on a million dancing motes of dust. At the center of the empty stage, under a single sad work light, sat the old Steinway. It was a grand piano in name only these days, its once glossy ebony finish now a landscape of scratches and cloudy patches. Mr. Davies, the music teacher, stood beside it with a frown, pressing a single key over and over. Thump. It was a dull wooden sound, like a book being dropped on carpet. The middle C's hammer was clearly sticking. He sighed, running a hand through his already messy hair. The annual fall talent show was in 3 days, and this piano was the star, the centerpiece. Every year, kids performed pop songs, comedy routines, and shaky solos on it. It wasn't a great piano, but it was theirs. And now it was sick. He'd spent an hour with the screwdriver and felt from the maintenance kit, but the problem was deeper inside. He needed to hear the notes from the audience to diagnose which ones were dead or dying. He was alone. The student volunteers had all left, eager to start their weekend dot just then. A soft, rhythmic squeaking broke the quiet. From the shadows at the back of the stage, a figure emerged. It was the evening custodian, pushing her wide, gray cleaning cart. She moved with a quiet, efficient grace. She was a woman, maybe in her late 50s, with kind lines around her eyes and dark hair streaked with silver, pulled back in a simple bun. Her name was Elena. Most of the students and teachers just knew her as the nice lady who smiled and said good night, the one who made sure the hall smelled like lemons and bleach every morning. She stopped her cart at the edge of the stage, looking at Mr. Davies and his toolbox with a gentle curiosity. "Trouble with the old thing?" she asked. Her voice was soft, with a faint, unplaceable accent that smoothed the edges of her words. Mr. Davies jumped, not having heard her approach. "Oh, Elena? Hi. Yeah, it's giving up the ghost. I've got a sticky hammer and I think a few strings are out of tune, but I need to hear it from out there." He gestured to the empty, cavernous hall. "I hate to ask, but could you? Could you just press a few keys for me? One at a time? So I can listen?" He felt a little silly asking. She was here to clean, not to be his piano assistant. But Elena just nodded, a small, easy smile on her face. "Of course. I have time." She parked her cart carefully, wiped her hands on her dark blue uniform trousers, and walked to the piano. She didn't just slump onto the bench. She placed her hand on the smooth wood of the piano side for a moment, almost like a greeting, before sitting down. She adjusted the bench slightly, a small, automatic movement. Mr. Davies, already turning to walk down the stage steps into the auditorium, didn't notice. "Okay," he called, walking halfway down the center aisle before turning around. "Let's start with that pesky middle C. Just give it a good, firm press." From the stage, Elena nodded. She looked down at the keys, a sea of black and white. She found the note, but instead of jabbing it with a finger, she positioned her hand thumb on C, fingers curved gently, and played the note. It wasn't a thump this time. It was a clear, round tone that hung in the silent air. She played it again, listening. "Sounds okay from here." Mr. Davies shouted, "Now try the F above it, the one that's usually tinny." Elena moved her hand, found the F, she played it. A pure, singing note floated out. Then, almost without thinking, her other hand came to the keyboard. Her right hand played the F again, and her left hand found a chord below it. Then another. It wasn't a song, not really. It was a cascade of notes, a little waterfall of sound that resolved into the opening of a Bach prelude. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. She stopped as if catching herself doing something she CHOULDN single quotes T. Mr. Davies had frozen halfway down the aisle. That wasn't a single note. That was music. Real, intentional, beautiful music. He walked slowly back towards the stage, his toolbox forgotten on a seat. "You play?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Elena looked up, that same mild smile on her face. She shrugged, a small, humble movement. "A long time ago, when I was a girl, it comes back sometimes." She looked at the keys, not at him. A laugh of disbelief escaped Mr. Davies. "A long time ago? Sounded pretty right now to me." "That was Batch. You have a good ear," she said simply. He leaned against the stage, looking up at her. The work light cast a warm halo around her. For the first time, he really looked at her. He saw the hands resting in her lap, slender, strong-looking hands with long fingers. He saw the straightness of her back. He'd passed her 100 times in the hallway, always in a hurry, always with a quick, "Hello, Elena." He realized he knew nothing about her, not really. Where she was from, what her life was like before the blue uniform and the cleaning cart. "Well," he said, trying to sound casual, "since you're already up there and you clearly know your way around, how about we do a proper check? Play a scale or something. Let's see if the dampers are working on the high notes." He expected maybe a C major scale. Maybe, if she was feeling bold, a little heart and soul. He was already thinking about the piano's mechanics, about the talent show. Elena nodded. "A scale." She turned back to the keyboard. She took a breath, a deep, slow breath that seemed to change her posture. Her shoulders relaxed and then squared slightly. Her chin lifted a fraction. It was a subtle shift, but the woman who had been wiping down whiteboards 20 minutes ago seemed to fade away. In her place sat someone else. Someone waiting in a silent room for a cue only they could hear. Her hands lifted, hovered for a second over the keys, and then descended. But it wasn't a scale. It was a series of arpeggios, flowing from the lowest register to the highest, a rippling, liquid run of notes that tested every section of the piano. The sound was shockingly full. It revealed the piano's true, buried character, a little brittle in the top, warm and woody in the middle, a resonant growl in the bass. It was the sound of someone waking the instrument up, listening to its voice. Mr. Davies's mouth went slightly dry. This wasn't a hobbyist. This was something else entirely. The last note of the arpeggio faded into the dusty air of the auditorium. In the silence that followed, a silence that now felt thick with expectation, Elena's hands found a new position on the keys. Her gaze was distant, fixed on something far beyond the back wall of the Oak Ridge High Auditorium. And then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. A simple, questioning melody in the right hand, answered by a deep, resonant chord in the left. It was a lonely sound, echoing in the empty space. Mr. Davies, still leaning against the stage, felt the hair on his arms stand up. He knew this piece. It was Chopin. Not the easy, flowing nocturne some of his advanced students struggled through. This was something else. This was a story being told. The music began to breathe. The quiet opening gave way to a faster, rippling passage. Elena's fingers, which moments before had been holding a cleaning rag, now moved with a fluid, impossible grace. They weren't just pressing keys. They were dancing, leaping, whispering, and then crashing with a power that made the old piano's frame shudder. The melody would sing, clear and heartbreakingly beautiful, and then it would be chased, swallowed up by a torrent of furious, complex notes that roared through the auditorium like a storm. Mr. Davies forgot about the sticky hammer. He forgot about the talent show. He slowly, silently, sank into the nearest auditorium seat, about 10 rows back. He couldn't look away. The woman on stage was a stranger. The gentle custodian was gone. In her place was a conductor, a sculptor, a warrior, all at once. Her body moved with the music a slight sway, a lean into a passionate phrase, a sharp recoil as the chords turned dark and dramatic. Her face, usually so calm and placid, was alive with a fierce concentration. There was joy in it, and pain, and a deep, profound knowing. He watched her hands. They were a blur during the frantic runs, and suddenly, perfectly still and controlled for a single, piercing high note that hung in the air like a tear. The piece was a roller coaster. It would build to a frantic, nearly violent climax, making Mr. Davies's heart pound, and then it would collapse back into a fragile, aching sadness that was almost harder to bear. This wasn't entertainment. This was an experience. It was someone pouring out a memory, or a dream, or a lifetime of feeling, directly into the sound. A janitor's cart sat in the stage shadows, a bottle of blue cleaning spray glinting in the low light. A vacuum cleaner hose coiled beside it like a sleeping snake. This absurd contrast made the whole scene feel like a dream. The familiar, slightly shabby school auditorium, with its chewed gum under the seats and the faded curtain with the torn edge, had been transformed. For these minutes, it was Carnegie Hall. It was a concert stage in some European capital. The air itself felt different, charged. The music swelled again, a heroic, marching theme rising from the chaos. Elena's shoulders were set, her back perfectly straight. She wasn't just playing the notes. She was pulling them out of the piano, out of herself, forcing this old, tired instrument to speak a language it had probably never spoken. And it answered her. It sang for her. It growled and wept and shouted for her in a way it never did for the high school jazz band or the choir accompanist. Mr. Davies thought of his own piano lessons as a kid, the tedious hours of practice. He thought of the best musicians he'd ever heard live. This, in this unlikely place, by this unlikely person, was beyond any of it. It wasn't just technical skill, though the skill was staggering. It was the soul in it. It was the story. He felt like he was witnessing a secret, something huge and private he was never meant to see. A sudden, incredibly difficult series of cascading notes, like a waterfall made of glass, flowed from her fingers. It was flawless. It was inhuman. And then, just as suddenly, a return to that first lonely melody. But it was changed now. It was heavier, laden with everything that had come before. The journey was coming to an end, that the final minutes of the piece were a slow, heartbreaking climb toward an inevitable conclusion. The tension built and built, note by note, chord by chord. Elena's expression was one of pure focus, of living inside every single sound. The final chords were not loud, but they were immense, full of a terrible final beauty. They were a resignation, a goodbye, and then silence, a true, deep, ringing silence. The last vibration of the piano string faded into the air. The echo died in the rafters. For a long moment, nothing moved. Elena's hands remained on the keys, then slowly, gently, she lifted them and let them rest in her lap. She bowed her head, her shoulders rising and falling with a slow breath. The spell was broken. The concert was over. On the floor, Mr. Davies realized he had been holding his breath. He let it out in a shaky sigh. He felt drained, like he'd just lived through something. He also felt like an intruder. He didn't clap. Clapping would have felt wrong, too small, too cheap for what had just happened. It would have been like applauding a sunset or a prayer. He watched as Elena reached out and quietly, with a touch that was almost a caress, closed the fallboard over the piano keys. The click of the latch was a tiny, ordinary sound in the vast quiet. She sat there for another few seconds, just looking at the closed piano. Then she stood up. The movement was different now. The straight-backed performer was receding. She smoothed her blue uniform trousers, a simple, practical gesture. She turned, and her eyes found Mr. Davies in the shadowy seats. Her face was calm again, soft. The fierce light in her eyes was gone, replaced by the familiar, gentle kindness. She looked like herself again. The custodian. The woman who kept the school clean. She walked to her cleaning cart, her sensible shoes making soft sounds on the wooden stage. She picked up a cloth and began wiping the top of the piano where she had leaned, erasing any faint fingerprints. It was a routine, automatic motion. Mr. Davies finally found his voice. It came out hoarse, a whisper that still carried across the empty space. That was the Chopin G minor ballade. Elena paused in her wiping. She didn't look at him, just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, she said softly. It was. He stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. He walked down the aisle and climbed the steps to the stage, feeling like he was approaching a monument. He stopped a few feet from her, from the cart, from the piano. Elena, he began, but the words stuck in his throat. Asterisk, who are you? Sounded too dramatic. Asterisk, how did you do that? Sounded stupid. He just shook his head, a slow, bewildered movement. I had no idea. She finished wiping the piano, folded the cloth, and placed it back on her cart. She finally met his gaze. There was a hint of sadness in her smile now, and something else, acceptance, maybe. It was a long time ago, she repeated, but the words meant something completely different now. A different life. She took the handle of her cleaning cart. The squeaky wheel announced her readiness to move on, to return to her rounds. She had floors to mop, trash to empty. The masterpiece was over. The work remained. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the work light overhead. The teacher and the custodian stood on the stage, separated by a few feet and a vast, unspoken history. The air still felt thick with the ghost of the music. Mr. Davies rubbed the back of his neck, trying to find the right words. A different life, he echoed quietly. He looked from her calm face to the piano, then to her cart. Would you like to take a break? The teacher's lounge has terrible coffee, but it's hot. If you have time? He expected her to say no, to give her gentle smile, push her cart away, and disappear into the back halls. That's what always happened. She was a quiet ghost in the school's evening routine, but she hesitated. She looked at the clock on the auditorium wall, then back at him. A small nod. A short break would be nice. Thank you. She parked her cart neatly against the stage curtains, and they walked out together, the squeak of her cart's wheel replaced by the tap of their shoes on the linoleum. The halls were profoundly empty, lit by every other fluorescent light. Their footsteps echoed. It felt strange, walking beside her like this. He'd known her for years, yet he felt he was walking with a complete stranger. The teacher's lounge was a cluttered, worn-out room that smelled of old microwave popcorn and burnt coffee. He gestured to one of the lumpy armchairs. Please sit. I'll get the coffee. She sat, her posture still remarkably straight, her hands folded in her lap. She looked around the room at the faded inspirational posters, the bulletin board crammed with memos, the stack of ungraded papers on the table, with a quiet curiosity. As if seeing it for the first time, he brought over 2 mugs of dark, bitter coffee. Cream or sugar? Black is fine, she said, taking the mug with both hands. She took a small sip, her eyes closing for just a second. A simple pleasure. He sat across from her, holding his own mug for warmth. He didn't know where to start. That piece, he began. The ballade. It's one of the hardest things in the repertoire. I've only ever heard it on recordings. By professionals? She nodded slowly, looking into her coffee. It is a mountain to climb. Even when you know the path, the weather can change. Her words were thoughtful, measured. Did you? Were you a professional? The question felt too direct, but he couldn't help it. She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. She took another sip. For a time, she said finally. In my home country. A very long time ago. Where is home? He asked gently. A small country in the east, she said, a vague wave of her hand. It does not matter now. It is a different place. I came here. For quiet. She said the word quiet as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. He thought of the roaring storm of sound she had just conjured from the piano. Quiet, he repeated, unable to hide the note of disbelief. She understood. A faint, real smile touched her lips. The quiet is outside. The music. She placed a hand lightly on her chest. The music is always here. But it is a private thing now. It is better that way. Why? The word was out before he could stop it. Why keep that hidden? The students? My God, Elena, if they could hear that, if they could see what's possible, it would change them. Her expression grew more serious, more distant. The world of that kind of music, it is not just the playing. It is politics. It is pressure. It is a constant competition, not just with others, but with yourself. It is never good enough. The critics, the managers, the audiences who only want a show. She shook her head slowly. It eats the joy. It ate mine. One day, I played a concert. A big one. I walked off the stage, and I knew. I could not do it anymore. The cost was too high. She spoke without drama, just a simple, sad truth. I put the lid down on my piano at home for a full year. I did not touch it. I moved here. I found this job. It is honest work. I see the results. She gestured around the clean room. And at night, sometimes, when the school is empty and peaceful, I walk into the auditorium. I play for the silence. I play for myself. It is the only way the music has stayed alive inside me. Mr. Davies listened, his heart aching. He thought of his own love for music, which had always been about sharing it, teaching it, filling rooms with it. The idea of locking something so magnificent away, of only letting it out in the dark for an audience of empty chairs, felt like a tragedy. But tonight, he said softly, you played for me. She met his eyes. You asked for a simple melody. I meant to give you one. But the piano, it felt alive tonight. And for a moment, I forgot. I forgot I was the cleaner. I was just a person at a piano. And the music wanted to come out. She shrugged, a little helplessly. It has been many years since I played that piece for another person. I am so grateful you did, he said, and he meant it more than he could express. It was the most incredible thing I have ever heard. Not just here, ever. A faint pink touched her cheeks. She looked down, embarrassed by the direct praise. You are kind. The piano is out of tune. My fingers are old and stiff. He almost laughed. Please, don't do that. Don't downplay it. What you did? It was a miracle in this old building. He leaned forward. Elena, the talent show is on Thursday. The kids, they do their little pop songs and comedy skits. What if? What if you closed the show? As a surprise. Just one piece. You don't have to be introduced. You could just play. Her reaction was immediate and firm. She shook her head, her gentle face set in a new, determined line. No, absolutely not. Just think about it. No, she said again, her voice quiet but solid as stone. That world, the audience, the expectation. That is what I left. This is my peace now. This job, this quiet life. If I play for a crowd, even a school crowd, the word gets out. People talk. Then it becomes a thing. The janitor, who is a secret pianist, they would want more. They would ask questions. The quiet would be gone. She placed her mug on the table with a final sounding click. The music is my private friend. I will not put it on display. I cannot. He saw the resolve in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was a hard-won protection of something fragile. He had asked her to play a simple melody, and he had received a gift he didn't deserve. To ask for more would be selfish. He held up his hands in surrender. Okay, I understand. I'm sorry. I wish others could feel what I felt tonight. She softened a little. You felt it. That is enough. Sometimes one person is enough. She stood up, smoothing her uniform. I must finish my rounds. The bathrooms on the second floor will not clean themselves. He stood too, feeling the conversation was over. He had trespassed into her past, and she had gently but firmly shown him the boundary. Thank you, he said, not just for the coffee, for trusting me with that, with your music. She gave him her usual kind custodian smile, the mask comfortably back in place. The F-sharp in the upper register is still a little dull. You might want to have the tuner look at it. And with that practical, professional note, she walked out of the lounge, heading back towards her cart, back to her world of mops and silence. Mr. Davies stood alone. The echo of Chopin and the faint smell of lemon cleaner mixing in the air. He felt he had been given a key to a treasure box, only to be told he could never open it again. He looked out the lounge window at the darkening sky. The school was quiet, but now he knew a profound secret lived within its walls. A masterpiece walked the halls, pushing a cleaning cart, guarding a silent, beautiful fire. The next few days passed in a strange, muffled way for the music teacher. The world looked the same students rushing to class, the same announcements crackling over the intercom, the same stack of papers to grade, but everything felt different. It was like after you learn a secret, you see the person who holds it in a new light everywhere. You go. He'd be in the middle of teaching a basic chord progression to his freshman class when his mind would wander. He'd picture the custodian's hands, those same hands that emptied his classroom trash every evening, flying over the keys in a furious, beautiful blur. He'd hear the ghost of that monumental music in his head while the kids practiced their simple, plodding scales. The contrast was dizzying. He saw her twice. Once, she was mopping the main hallway early in the morning, before first bell. She gave him her usual soft, "Good morning," and he'd managed a choked, "Hello, Elena," in return, feeling like a fraud for knowing what he knew. The second time, he was staying late to set up chairs in the auditorium for the upcoming show. She came in silently, with her cart to do a pre-event clean. They exchanged a look as full of unasked questions and awe, hers calm and containing a quiet warning. She went about her work, dusting the seats and wiping down the railings, giving the piano a wide, respectful berth, as if it were a sleeping animal she didn't want to wake. He respected her wish for privacy. He didn't tell a soul, but the weight of the secret was a physical thing in his chest. The talent show, which he usually saw as a fun, chaotic night of school spirit, now felt trivial, almost silly. How could a kid lip-syncing to a pop song follow what he had heard? It felt like serving a fast food meal after someone had given you a taste of the most exquisite, rare dish in the world. About the night of the talent show arrived. The air in the school was electric with the giddy noise of teenagers. Backstage was a riot of nerves and glitter, guitar cases, and costume changes. The auditorium buzzed with the voices of parents and friends, the rustle of programs, The squawk of a feedback-prone microphone being tested. Mr. Davies was the host and stage manager, a role he usually enjoyed. Tonight, he felt disconnected, going through the motions. He welcomed everyone, cracked his usual jokes, and introduced the first act, a dance group whose enthusiasm made up for their slightly out-of-sync moves. The crowd clapped and cheered. It was a normal school event. He watched from the wings as a shy sophomore sang a folk song, her voice trembling but sweet. A group of juniors did a comedy skit that got big laughs. A boy from the jazz band played a decent saxophone solo. It was all fine. It was good, even. The kids were brave and proud, and their families were beaming. But his eyes kept drifting to the old Steinway, sitting in the dark at the side of the stage, waiting to be rolled out for the accompaniments. And his mind kept drifting to the empty hall 3 nights before, to the sound that had shaken the dust from the rafters. During intermission, he slipped away from the backstage chaos. He needed air. He walked the quiet, dark hallways, the roar of the crowd in the auditorium fading to a distant murmur. He found himself outside the custodial closet. The door was slightly ajar, a light on inside. He peeked in. She was there, sitting on a small stool, eating a quiet dinner from a Tupperware container. A simple meal of rice and vegetables. She looked up, not surprised to see him. "The show is going well?" she asked politely. "It's fine. The kids are having fun." He leaned against the doorframe. "It just feels loud." She smiled a little at that. "Young people are loud. It is their job." "I haven't told anyone," he blurted out, needing her to know. "I know," she said simply. "Thank you." She took another bite of her food. The ordinary act of it, in this small, concrete room with its smell of cleaning supplies, was so at odds with the memory he carried. "It's just hard to forget," he said, his voice low. "What I heard. It's all I can think about." She put her fork down and looked at him, really looked at him. She saw his conflict, his struggle to fit what he'd witnessed back into the ordinary box of his world. Her expression held a touch of pity. "You must forget it," she said, not unkindly. "Or at least you must put it away. That music was a gift for one night. A secret between the piano and me, and you happened to be there. Do not let it ruin the music that is happening tonight. Their music." She gestured towards the distant sound of applause. "That is real, too. It is just a different kind of real." Her words shamed him. She was right. He was so caught up in his own revelation that he was missing the point of the whole evening to celebrate the courage of his students. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry." "No sorry," she said. She closed her container. "I will be in soon to clean the backstage area after the final bow. It is a big mess they make, with the streamers and confetti." He returned to the backstage area. His perspective shifted. When the next act, a girl playing a lively, if slightly uneven, version of a modern pop song on the piano finished, he clapped with genuine warmth. He saw the joy on her face, the pride of her parents in the front row. This was their masterpiece. This was enough. The show neared its end. The final act was a group of seniors performing a medley of songs from their favorite musical. They brought the house down. The applause was thunderous. The performers took their bows, grinning and hugging. Mr. Davies came back on stage for his closing remarks. "What an amazing night," he said into the microphone, and this time he meant it. "Let's hear it one more time for all our talented students." The applause swelled again. Parents began to gather their things. Kids rushed to find their friends backstage. As the crowd started to chatter and move towards the exits, Mr. Davies turned to leave the stage. His job was done. But then he saw something that made him stop. At the back of the auditorium, one of the exit doors was propped open. The custodian stood there, leaning lightly on her now empty cleaning cart, watching the last of the audience trickle out. She was part of the scenery, employee waiting to begin her work. No one paid her any mind, but then her gaze drifted from the crowd to the stage. It landed on the piano. From his place on the stage, he saw her eyes soften. He saw her head tilt just a fraction, as if listening to a sound no one else could hear. She wasn't smiling, but there was a profound recognition in her face. A kind of quiet goodbye in that moment. He understood something. She wasn't hiding her music out of shame or fear. She was protecting a sacred, private love affair. What she had shared with him was a fleeting moment of that love, an accidental glimpse. The performance for the crowd, the applause, the noise, that was the world she had willingly left behind. The silent communion with the instrument after everyone was gone, that was the world she had chosen. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in her direction, a signal of understanding. She didn't nod back. She simply turned, pushed her cart silently out the door, and disappeared into the dark hallway, ready to transform the chaotic, joyful mess back into an orderly, silent school. The auditorium was almost empty now. The show was over. But for the teacher, standing on the stage, bathed in the work lights, the real music, the silent, powerful echo of a masterpiece, was just beginning to settle in his soul, where it would stay forever. Time moved on at Oak Ridge High. The talent show became a memory, then a story, then just another line in the school yearbook. The crisp fall air turned bitter with winter, then softened into a rainy spring. The routines of the school year ground forward with their own familiar rhythm. For the music teacher, life was mostly the same, but with a subtle, permanent change inside him. He heard music differently now. When a student struggled through a difficult passage, he didn't just hear the wrong notes. He saw the potential for a journey, the mountain they were trying to climb. He became a more patient teacher, his expectations less about perfection and more about the feeling behind the sound. He never mentioned that night to anyone. It was a sealed treasure, a private source of wonder that he carried quietly. His interactions with the custodian settled into a new, unspoken pattern. They still exchanged their good mornings and good nights, but now there was a depth to the simple greetings. A look would pass between them, his full of a respect that bordered on reverence, hers containing a quiet acknowledgement and a gentle insistence on normalcy. She was, and would remain, Elena who cleaned the halls. He was Mr. Davies who taught the classes. That was the surface, and they both agreed to keep it polished and smoothed out sometimes. If he was working very late on a lesson plan or grading papers in his classroom, he would hear it, faint like a dream drifting under a door. The distant sound of the piano from the auditorium. Never the storm of the Chopin ballade again. It was usually fragments. A melancholic snippet of a nocturne, a handful of bars from a Debussy piece that sounded like moonlight on water, a series of complex, searching scales that were clearly just for the joy of feeling the keys. He never went to investigate. He would simply stop what he was doing, put down his pen, and listen until the last note faded into the building's nighttime silence. It felt like receiving a blessing. One afternoon in late May, with the school year winding down and a sleepy warmth in the air, he was in the auditorium, setting up for the final choir concert. He was alone, testing the microphone levels. The piano sat closed. A silent monument. The custodian came in, not with her evening cart, but with a small toolbox. She wore her usual blue uniform. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Hello," she replied. She walked to the piano and placed the toolbox on top. The humidity is changing with the season. The G below middle C is buzzing. A little felt has come loose, I think. "May I?" He was stunned. You know how to fix it?" "A little," she said, with that modest shrug he now understood, was a mask for vast competence. When you spend a lifetime with them, you learn their aches and pains. He gestured. Please, be my guest. He watched as she opened her toolbox. It wasn't the school's generic maintenance kit. It held specialized, polished tools, a tuning lever, proper rubber mutes, a small coil of spare string, neat squares of felt in different thicknesses. These were a pianist's tools, a surgeon's instruments. She opened the piano lid, then carefully removed the front panel, exposing the intricate inner harp of strings and hammers. She didn't hesitate. She found the offending key, pressed it, listened to the buzz, and peered inside with a small flashlight held in her teeth. Her movements were efficient, gentle, and deeply knowledgeable. It is just as I thought, she said, her voice slightly muffled by the flashlight. She selected a screwdriver and a tiny square of felt. Within minutes, she had tightened a screw and inserted the felt in a precise spot. She played the note again. A clear, pure tone rang out. There, it will hold for a while. He was speechless, watching her reassemble the piano with the care of someone handling a newborn. Where did you learn all that? When you travel for concerts, she said, wiping her hands on a clean cloth from her toolbox. The pianos are not always perfect. Sometimes, in a small town, there is no technician. You must learn to be your own doctor, if only for a temporary fix. You cannot play a sonata with a buzzing note. She said it as plainly as someone might say, you couldn't drive a car with a flat tire. She closed the lid, latched it, and packed her tools away. It should be better for the concert tonight. Thank you, he said, and then added, not just for this, for letting me hear that once. It changed how I hear everything. She looked at him, the late afternoon sun from the high windows casting a soft light on her face. For the first time, he saw no trace of the custodian, nor the fierce performer. He saw just a person, a woman who had lived many lives, carrying the weight and the gift of all of them. It changed me too, a little, she admitted softly, to play it for someone again. I remembered that music is a bridge, not just a room you lock yourself inside. She looked around the empty auditorium. But this is my bridge. This place, at night. It is enough for me. He understood completely now. It wasn't a sad story. It was a choice. A life of quiet service, punctuated by private, profound communion with beauty. It was a different kind of masterpiece, not one carved in the spotlight, but one built in the silent, steady hours of a life lived with purpose. The choir concert that night was lovely. The students' voices soared, accompanied by the now perfectly voiced piano. Parents beamed. Mr. Davies conducted, his heart full. After the last bow, after the last parent had left, and the last student had grabbed their flowers and rushed out, he stayed behind to turn off the lights. The auditorium was empty, still smelling of perfume and floor-polished dot. Before he flipped the last switch, he walked to the piano. He placed his hand on its cool, closed lid. He thought of the hands that had fixed it, and the magic those hands could create. He didn't feel envy or frustration anymore. He felt a profound gratitude. Some art, he realized, wasn't meant for museums or grand stages. Some art was like a rare, wild flower that bloomed only in a hidden valley, for no audience but the sky and the earth. The fact that he had accidentally stumbled into that valley, that he had been allowed to see that single, breathtaking bloom, was a privilege. He turned off the light and walked out into the hallway. As he locked the auditorium door, he saw a faint light spilling from the open door of the custodial closet further down the hall. He heard the soft clink of a bucket, the sound of water running. He smiled to himself. The masterpiece was not finished. It was simply waiting for the quiet to return, for the audience of empty chairs to take their seats once more. And it would continue, night after night, a beautiful, secret heartbeat in the center of the sleeping school. He walked out into the warm spring night, the sounds of the final concert still ringing in his ears. But underneath it all, a deeper, more enduring music, a single, perfect note of understanding, clear and resonant, that would stay with him for the rest of his days.